Hey guys, welcome back to DCS World. I'm Spudknocker, as always. And today we have a very exciting new addition to the lineup of DCS World aircraft, the UH-60L Blackhawk, which is just released from Skyward Flight Media. Now, the best thing about this helicopter is not that it's a sorely needed addition to the lineup of aircraft in DCS, but the fact that it is in fact completely free and is a mod that you are free to download and install at your pleasure. Now, today we're going to fly the helicopter around the airspace of Guam a little bit, do a cold start procedure, and to the best of my ability, that is, after having played with it for a few minutes, and talk about whether or not this helicopter is going to be worth your time to actually install onto your PC. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and kind of jog around the helicopter and take a look at its external model. We've got a US Coast Guard skin on our UH-60 today, because of the fact that right now it is a non-combatant helicopter only. There is no way to shoot at the bad guys with this helicopter at the moment. It lacks any door gunners, and it does not have any ability to fire Hellfires or rockets like any of the deep action penetrator models of the UH-60. So it is in fact only useful for going from place to place, dropping things off, troops, vehicles, things of that nature that can be coded into the DCS World Mission Editor. But today we're going to see, is it worth it to just jump in and have some fun with it? I know the developers have stated in their documentation that they definitely plan on bringing some door gunners, at least, to the helicopter in the future. So I'm not a helicopter expert by any means, but I think I know the Mi-24 Hind pretty well at this point. But so we're just going to hop into the helicopter and just try our best to actually give you guys a really awesome overview of this free mod, which is pretty awesome. So in the helicopter, we have a couple different seats. We've got seat 1, which is the right-hand seat in this helicopter. Seat 2 in the left-hand seat by pressing the number keys on your keyboard. Seat 3 is a door gunner slot on the left-hand side of the helicopter. And seat 4 is the door gunner slot on the right-hand side of the helicopter. So I'm sure these are going to be used in the future for doing the pew-pew out the side of the helicopter, just like you see in Black Hawk Down. So we'll go ahead and head back to the right-hand seat, and we'll get going with the cold start procedure for this helicopter. I don't know if you guys noticed it, but on the outside of this helicopter, the actual model for the helicopter looked very nice. The skins are a little too clean for my taste, but that's okay. I'm sure somebody out there is going to start weathering skins for this helicopter and creating entirely new ones right off the bat. There are quite a few skins that come with the helicopter, some fictional and some real life. There's Israeli skins, US Army skins, Coast Guard skins, Japanese Coast Guard skins, things of that nature. So with that in mind, keep in mind that when I actually bound the keybinds for this helicopter, I had a lot of trouble binding the collective. Just keep binding it, trying to get it in the right spot, whether you need to invert it or change it in any way, adjust its curve, and then if it doesn't take, just go ahead and clear that key binding out and keep rebinding it until you get it to work correctly. For me, it was opposite. As I pull my collective up, it was pushing it down in the sim, and it just would not take my command to invert it until I closed DCS World, opened it up again, cleared out the keybind, and added the keybind again a couple times over before it actually took and went into the right position to match what I'm doing in real life. But that's kind of a small gripe, and of course, guys, it is free, so we can't give the developer too much trouble for that, and it's entirely possible that was a me problem, not a them problem or a helicopter problem. So, with that in mind, let's go ahead and turn on our generators, our APU, and we'll get some lights, because as you guys know, I always like having lights on in my cockpit. And as you move the mouse around the cockpit of the aircraft, you'll notice that there's quite a few switches and things that are not operational. I'm sure they'll be made operational in the near future if it's possible for this team. If not, it's not a huge deal. We do get it for free. Alright, so we got the APU turned on. We're all good to go there. Make sure that my collective is fully down. Okay. And with that in mind, we can go ahead and turn on the fuel cocks for the two engines. And we're going to start off with the right-hand number 2 engine for the startup procedure. So we're going to press the engine start button, which resides right at the base of the throttle. Then we're going to bring the number 2 engine control lever into the idle position. And over here on our engine indicator tapes, we can see the speed of our engine starting to go up. Oil temperature, oil pressure are all starting to rise into the green. We'll wait till engine 2 stabilizes before we go in and actually start up engine 1. The cockpit looks pretty darn nice. Again, it's a little clean. It looks like it's come fresh off the factory floor. And that tends to be the modus operandi for a lot of these mods in DCS world, is things just look a little too clean. And I think that developers could do well to scratch things up and make things look a little bit dirty, and that could actually probably help mask some of maybe the deficiencies with the actual models of the cockpits and the outside of the aircraft to make things look a little grittier and a little bit more detailed through texturing. But again, it's free, and if any developers who are watching this of the UH-60, it's just a suggestion, and I'm not trying to be too harsh or anything like that. So let's go ahead and start up engine 1 right into the idle position. And again, guys, I am not by any means a helicopter enthusiast or a helicopter expert. I just barely know how to fly the Mi-24. Alright, so as that's coming up, we're going to go ahead and start turning on our SAS, and we'll lock our tail wheel. Keep in mind, I don't know if this is a bug or not, but keep in mind that as you're flying the helicopter, locking the tail wheel on the ground locks the tail wheel in the same way that it would in, say, a warbird or a fixed-wing tail dragger, in that the tail wheel will not be affected by the rudder pedals. This also seems to affect the anti-torque pedals up in the air in not allowing the aircraft to yaw left and right based off of your rudder pedals. So I don't know if that's a bug in the mod that is locking your pedals when you're up in the air, but just something that I've noticed. So once you take off, if you haven't unlocked your tail wheel for, say, taxiing, definitely turn it off. Cool. So looks like that is all on and ready to go. Let's go ahead and turn on our navigational systems. With Track IR, it's a little bit hard to see everything in here. It's not terrible, but it is definitely a little bit on the tricky side. And I'm just trying to do the best I can here to figure this stuff out. Get radios on. Again, I'm not exactly the most expert in helicopters, but we're going to do our best here. And the actual cockpit is so large that I'm having a hard time seeing everything that I need to see in Track IR. And we'll go back to the right-hand side here. We've got our helmet-mounted display on. Alright, so we are ready to taxi out to the runway. So let's go ahead and push our throttles up into the fly position. We're going to pull up on our collective just a hair, and we are going to start our taxi out to the runway. We're going to unlock our tail wheel, and we're going to hit the trimmer. And as you guys can see with that tail wheel unlocked, we are able to start the taxi of our helicopter. Actually quite easy to taxi in this helicopter. I think the idea of having a tail wheel on these larger helicopters as opposed to a nose wheel in the Russian format makes a lot of sense. in terms of the way a helicopter flies, it makes sense in terms of how it would taxi on the ground. And we'll just gently bring her on over to the runway. And the only reason I'm taxiing to the runway is just to give you guys a visual of what it's like to taxi this aircraft. That was a little bit quick on the taxi. Just like any other tail wheel, you gotta have to be really on it with your rudder inputs as you're on the ground. Things can happen very, very quickly, and though the tail likes to swing out to the side in very much the same way that a fixed-wing tail dragger will. Alright, and as we get out towards the runway, we'll start to gently pull back on the stick to slow the helicopter down. When you're taxiing a helicopter around, you want to use the cyclic as much as possible for your speed changes, and only use the wheel brakes once you're stationary to hold the aircraft stationary in a single spot. So we're on the center line, pretty close to center line. Pretty cool skin, I love the Coast Guard skin. Living in San Diego for so long, see these guys buzzing up and down the coast of La Jolla all day long, 24/7, as well as Jayhawks and Seahawks. So it's very, very cool to see. So we'll go ahead and we will just very, very gently pull up that collective. See what we need to do in order to keep the helicopter nice and straight. Pull back a little bit, hit the trimmer, and up we go. I will say, a heck of a lot more stable than an Mi-24 Hind, but I guess that makes sense. It's definitely a newer helicopter. So we'll just kind of follow the runway down out towards the coast. It's very cool that they got a working HMD in this mod without, you know, having access to the SDK for DCS World. It's quite amazing. I mean, things look pretty darn nice. Definitely can't complain about this helicopter, that's for sure. And thankfully, all the gauges are in knots, because as an American, I am hobbled by my inability to read or use metric anything. Let's go ahead and come to the right and follow the coastline. So that way, we can have the coast on our side of the helicopter, and that way we'll be able to see a little bit more. And we're definitely chugging along now. Definitely don't want to get into retreating blade stall territory. Again, I'm not a huge helicopter expert. See if we can slow her down a little bit. There we go. The helicopter definitely always wants to come back to a level attitude, unlike the Russian helicopters, which don't have any of that advanced stability augmentation. Now we can see back into the back seat there. Hopefully all our swimmers in the back are ready to go for saving lives. I mean, this is hands off. I have my hands off of the cyclic and the collective. Obviously, we're descending a little bit, so we'll pull back on the collective slightly. And the helicopter really just wants to stay here. And we can turn that off for a little bit as we're just kind of flying around. So as somebody who's not an expert in helicopters, I have to imagine that the UH-60, especially the UH-60L, which is a relatively modern version of the Blackhawk, is far more stable than the Russian helicopters we have in DCS world. So I'm having a hard time telling whether or not the flight model is awesome or the helicopter itself is just a very, very stable and easy to fly helicopter. I have to dig more into the documentation for this aircraft, but I have to imagine there's a way to get a radar altimeter on the HMD, because right now we're showing 190-ish feet of barometric altitude. And definitely can't whip this helicopter around like you can an Mi-24. Mi-24 almost fly it like an airplane. You can really whip the thing around. The SAS systems in this helicopter seem to prevent that for the most part. And when your head's down, you can there we go. So there's the SAS boost turned off. So now we have a little bit more positive control on the helicopter. At least it feels that way. Yeah, because the helicopter is not trying to trim itself out back to a level position. The roll rate seems to have decreased, interestingly. Yeah, we're going real fast now. So let's try and slow us down a bit. I am guessing that my first attempt on landing here will be a fiery wreckage. So hopefully that doesn't happen, but I have a feeling that is what is going to happen. Yeah, everything is just very, very heavy in this helicopter. Hello. Turn that back on for now. So far, I would say it's definitely worth your time to try it out. Just keep in mind that right now the helicopter is not combat ready, and you cannot do any pew-pew with it, but you can definitely bring troops around the battlefield and pick up down pilots and things of that nature, which is pretty darn cool. There is, in fact, a USAF PJ skin for the helicopter. And there's the golf course. Try reducing the curvature on my stick and my rudder. This axis tune, bring this down, and just see. Yeah, that gives me a little bit more positive control. Yeah, this definitely feels different flying an Mi-24. It's not like you're flying an airplane anymore. The cyclic, or sorry, the collective is really for altitude. Feels more for altitude rather than speed in the Blackhawk. It feels like we're flying around in the region of reverse command far more than we are in the Mi-24 Hind, which is definitely something that's really interesting to me. Being, of course, the fixed-wing guy, kind of taking those dictums of fixed-wing flight and trying to apply them to a helicopter, of course, isn't going to work too well for me. The actual effect of the rotor blades looks pretty darn nice. It's very... external view isn't as good, but it's still pretty good. And this helicopter does come with a air-to-air refueling probe for those of you guys who want to try your best to not chop the basket off of a KC-130. I recommend always using a KC-130 so that way you can slow down as much as possible for you. Trimmer works very similarly to all the other helicopters in DCS, of course. Let's try and not crash as we head back to the airfield. Alrighty, there's the field. Having the VSI indicator on the right-hand side here of our HMD, I would say is very, very useful for keeping the helicopter kind of in a spot where you know it's maintaining a level flight attitude as well as maintaining altitude. And I think that's going to be something in the Apache that's going to be absolutely a fantastic thing to have, because that way you'll be able to really use the helicopter's advantage of being able to hide behind trees and hills and things like that, where it can actually hover. Whereas, of course, the Russian helicopters, they just can't hover very well to save their lives, at least the Mi-24. Alright, we'll line up on the same runway that we took off on. Try and get the rudders back in sync here with our slip skid indicator. There we go. Let's start slowing this bucket down if we can. The thing about flying helicopters in DCS is just gotta be patient, 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 patient. I always find myself trying to do things too quickly in DCS World helicopters. And it's just something that you can't do. I guess because it's a game, it's a simulator, people tend to rush things, even in fixed-wing aircraft in DCS World, and we've just gotta try to really avoid rushing. Because once you're in a real aircraft, you know, that's your sole purpose in life, is flying that aircraft and keeping it safe. And there's no thought of rushing the situation ever enters your mind. Whereas in DCS, you know, you're like, oh man, I gotta go run some errands, or, you know, get to school, or go to a meeting, or, you know, whatever it is. And you tend to rush a lot because it is a game. And that's where you get yourself in trouble, for sure. Yeah, that VSI on the right-hand side of the HMD is just super nice. Wow, I love it. Alright. Maybe I won't turn myself into a fireball here to start off with. That would be kind of nice. Again, trying my best to go as slowly as possible. Try and avoid that deadly rushing that we just talked about. Just slowing this helicopter down. Because it's a lot more powerful of a helicopter, it isn't nearly as heavy as an Mi-24. It has a lot more available power to it. It's not nearly as susceptible to VRS, and we can get it to hover a lot easier. I think we got a slight crosswind on the runway, and that's why we're having to kind of crab to the left slightly. Just got to slow it down. This is always the hardest part for me, is right here, where we're transitioning from flying to hovering and then into the landing. I always panic and rip the collective upwards, and that always gets me in trouble, big time. Let's see what we can do here. Come on, come on, come on, come on. Yeah, definitely a heck of a lot easier so far to land than an Mi-24. She just has a heck of a lot more available power to her that allows us to hover easier. And I guess as a transport helicopter, that is important. Whoop, whoop. Right here, this is where I always mess it up. It's right on the touchdown. Come on, come on, come on down, come on down. There we go. Touchdown right on the tail wheel first, and then brought the main wheels down. Whoop, and then I pulled back on the collective like a fixed wing tail wheel, or sorry, pulled back on the cyclic like I was flying a fixed wing tail wheel, just as a force of habit, and we started to roll backwards. So that's definitely something to watch out for. So we'll go ahead and taxi back to our startup spot. So why don't we try to do a hover taxi. Whoop, this is where I get in trouble as well with the helicopters, is trying to just very gently come off the ground. I tend to get kind of into an oscillation with the collective. Whenever I see, in San Diego, whenever I see Blackhawks or Jayhawks or Seahawks landing, for the most part it seems like they either go for a perfect three-point landing or they go for a very gentle touchdown on the tail wheel first and then bring the main wheels down. Whether or not that's correct, I'm not quite sure, so I'm sure someone can tell me in the comments section down below. But from what I've observed, that seems to be what happens. So we'll just very gently, very easily bring this bird back on over to our startup spot, right over here by these containers. Oop, and we're drifting backwards. Hello. Little side slip there. I'm probably making every Blackhawk pilot watch this just absolutely freak out, because I'm probably over-controlling the helicopter like crazy. Well, that's gonna happen in a simulator, that's for sure. I'm trying to slow her down a little bit. Whoop, whoop. Again, getting to that oscillation with the collective, just because I get freaked out and don't want to crash the helicopter. There's a gentle touchdown on the tail wheel, and then the main wheels. Collective all the way down, cyclic centered, retrim it, wheel brake on, and there we go. We are back where we started, guys. That turned out pretty darn well, and that was a lot of fun. I can absolutely assure you guys that you will not regret downloading the UH-60L Blackhawk from Skyward Flight Media. It's a ton of fun. I think this will be a DCS World fan favorite, and dare I say, it might be better than the A4 Skyhawk in terms of the quality of the mod itself, at least just right out of the gate here. So I hope you guys have an awesome rest of your day. Fly safe and stay healthy out there, guys. We'll see you in the next one.